Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Unsank Podcast. Today I am here with Jeremiah. He's a body language expert and he's here to share his story with us today.
Hi, Lexi. How's it going? Of
Hi, Jeremiah. Thank you for being here.
course. Glad to be here. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. I'm so excited. Body language is something that I find very interesting, and so it's great to have you on the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, can you just get started by like sharing what got you into this and like a little bit of background?
Yeah, I guess I can preface it with I've been through a lot of stuff throughout my life, and it's kind of driven me to the point I am now, and I wouldn't trade any of it. Like there's a lot of bad stuff, but it made me who I am today, and I'm very grateful for it. So I don't know. I guess I could just start way back from the beginning. Um, the kind of things that I went through as a kid was a little traumatizing here and there. My first memory actually is a memory of my father standing over me and my mom when we were huddled in the kitchen. He had a shotgun and he was threatening our lives, and that was my first memory, right? So that was a little traumatizing as a kid. There were multiple times where he would do things and he was very abusive, and he was kind of violent, and he did a lot of cocaine.
Hmm.
Actually,
Oh.
I actually should have died when I was like 2 years old because I drank. He put bleach in my kid's sippy cup because he was testing the cocaine. I guess, for those of you that don't know this, you can test cocaine by putting it in bleach and it kind of sinks and swirls to the bottom. But he put it in my sippy cup and I drank a bunch of it thinking it was apple juice mixed with Sprite or something like that, because that's what they used to give me a lot as a kid. And
Yeah.
all I remember is throwing up a bunch. And my mom said they couldn't call the cops, or they couldn't call the paramedics because they were frightened. And someone finally said, "You just got to feed him a bunch of milk." And so I drank a bunch of milk, and I guess I was okay.
Oh my.
So that's like, that was kind of my childhood in a nutshell. He was also pretty physically abusive. He only had to just reach for his belt. Speaking of body language, he would just reach for his belt and look at me in this sinister way, and I'd be like, frozen. I also have three sisters that he kind of, I don't know, he didn't really abuse them. He was harder on me when it came to abuse. My stepsister got it pretty bad. But all that being said, it made me who I am, and I'm grateful for it. The biggest fear I have is the abandonment fear. If you're familiar with like abandonment attachment and all that kind of stuff, is because he kind of left our lives when I was about 13. He left my sisters about the same age. It turned me into kind of an angsty teenager, to say the least. I was pretty rough and tumble, so to speak. I moved to this area here from Santa Cruz. I'm actually in Central Coast, California now. So I moved away from all my friends, and that's the whole abandonment thing there too. Is I had a little traumatic experience with losing all my friends at 16 years old. Like you have all your friend group, and then all of a sudden you got to start all over again. That kind of wasn't great. So I went through a lot of angsty stuff, and I was rebelling, and I was like breaking into houses and doing horrible things throughout my teenage years, that I somewhat regret now. But again, like I said, it's something that made me who I am. I was pretty depressed and full of anxiety at about 19, and I attempted suicide. And luckily for me, it didn't work out. So I'm still here. But it was a time in my life that looking back now, it's still kind of like, it makes me sort of like angsty and anxious just thinking about it. Um, but there were, I had a lot of friends that helped pull me out of that. And I started to do therapy, and I started getting into behavioral therapy, and just like the traditional, my parents were really, scared for my well-being. So they put me in with a therapist. And at that point, because of the suicide attempt, it was just like pills, 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 pills every day, and I felt like I was a zombie for a couple of years, just medicating. And at some point I broke out of that and I said, I don't want to take these pills anymore. It's too much. It's making me someone I'm really not. And, I moved on to self-medicating
Mhm.
through alcohol and marijuana. So that marijuana was actually a big help for me. It wasn't the best thing to do, but
Yeah.
at the time in my early 20s, I was like, I had limited resources and limited knowledge, a lot of limited knowledge back then. And so I would drink a lot and I would smoke a lot of weed and just not be motivated to do much, and just kind of like skating by day to day. And so through my early 20s, it was a lot of blackout nights. I was bartending even back then. That was the early years of bartending, where I really don't remember much. From about 20 to about 25, I was, drinking excessively.
Yeah.
And I ended up falling into a relationship with someone who was a pathological liar, sociopath, narcissist, all that wrapped into one person. And, it was comfortable for me because I was used to those kind of people.
Yeah.
Um, so we had a kid together, and that sort of shook me to my core. And it changed a lot of things for me, where I was like, okay, I need to step up. I need to get my life together. I have another person I'm going to be responsible for. I'm not going to be like my father. I'm going to be a much better father and do everything I can to be in this child's life and be the best influence I possibly can, right?
Yeah.
And so that sort of broke me through to who I am now, and like kind of my mentality now of just, trying to be a better person. And there were 4 years of just straight hell with this woman that I was dealing with. She wouldn't let me see my daughter unless I paid extra money on top of child support. She would always dangle the carrot basically and be like, you have to pay extra money in order to see her. And I would, because I was wanting to see my daughter so bad.
Yeah.
I found out later that was actually child support fraud. Like, she's not supposed to
Oh,
collect extra
good. There is
money.
a thing for that. Okay, cool. Because I hate
Yeah,
when people do that. Like, I know so many people with kids, and the other person will like weaponize the kid against them, or like try to extort more money from them. And it's just so wrong. Don't use your
yeah.
kids as weapons. That's not cool.
No, no. And that was, and she would do whatever it took. She didn't really care about anything but herself. She would say she cared about the kid, but it was more she was using the kid to get what she wanted out of life. She was collecting child support and she was getting her taxes, and so she was happy. She was making decent money just from that.
Yeah.
Um, so, but yeah, so those first 4 years kind of sucked of my child's life. Her name's Mila, by the way. She just went to school, so
Oh,
got the house to myself for a little bit. I had 4 years of custody battles, and luckily for me, her mom went to prison for a Ponzi scheme, and so I took over full custody. So I just had to wait it out, and I ended up taking full custody. But dealing with her and dealing with my dad and dealing with, all the things I dealt with kind of got me into the realm of lie detection. Like, if people are being deceptive, I want to know,
yeah.
because I'm dealing with people that are being very deceptive. And then being a bartender, you deal with people that are drunk, and you got to assess the situation, if someone's going to be violent, or if someone needs to get kicked out, or if you see like someone's starting to pass out at the bar, you got to cut them off or whatever.
Yeah.
So that kind of got me into that realm too. I started doing a lot more therapy stuff, and reading a lot of books on existential things, because I wanted to find like a meaning for life, and get more motivation, and be able to teach my daughter the things that I was never really taught as a kid. And yeah, so it was a pretty good couple of years after that. After I got custody, it was kind of like, okay, oh, I can relax. I have my kid. She's safe. She's with me. She's no longer with this narcissistic, abusive, and she would abuse my daughter too. Like, she would
Oh, that's
mentally
terrible.
abuse her, not physically. Like, she never got hit or anything, but she would mentally just harass her all the time and ask her like, what's your dad cooking for dinner? Make sure he gets you clothes, this and that, and that he's horrible, he's this, he's that. So she would constantly be poisoning my daughter's belief against me. Like, so I had to deal with, my daughter kind of going through some traumatic experiences, but luckily I went through my own. So I was able to teach her how to deal with it. And I'm still learning, I still learn stuff, and I've taught her a lot of body language stuff. And now when she deals with her mom, she just kind of like rolls her eyes, because she knows her mom's just kind of full of it. when she's
Yeah.
talking to her. Moving on to like the books that I read, there was Carl Jung, and he talks about like collective consciousness and synchronicities. And then there's other body language books, like Janine Driver has a really good book. Scott Roos has a body language book. And it's Chase Hughes that has something called the 6-minute X-ray that was really good. But learning all this stuff just kind of prepared me for what I got into, which was teaching people about body language. And now I talk to people on a one-on-one basis and try to help them through, whatever crisis they have. And having a bartending background, it helps me because people come in and talk to me all the time, and I felt like I was basically a therapist as a bartender.
Yeah.
The time in the bar anyway. So
Yeah, that's got to be a great way to like watch people and kind of like hone in on your body language assessment skills, as like drunk people are like, I don't know, you never know what kind of is gonna happen in a bar.
yeah, I got some stories. Like, I don't know if
Oh,
this is
I'm
the
sure
place
you
for
do.
that.
How do you work with people, and like how does that relate to trauma and help in like trauma healing and that whole realm?
So usually people, when they go through trauma, they come to a realization that they have the trauma. So I don't really help people with their trauma. I help people that realize they've been through trauma and that they want to heal, and they turn the corner and they're like, okay, I need to do something with my life. And for me, that was the point when I had a kid. I was like, okay, I got to turn my life around. There's
Yeah.
some people that you just can't help because they just don't want help, so the only person that can help you is yourself. Like, you have to want to help yourself through things. So people that want to help themselves, they'll come to me sometimes, and I'll help them identify what kind of trauma it is and how to work through that. And then once they work through that specific kind of trauma, whether it's abandonment or fear of rejection or, love unreciprocated, there's different kinds of trauma, and you have to do certain things in order to sort of heal through that. So there's a process. And once they sort of realize that process, you can get into the realm of, now it's time to start weeding those toxic people out of your life.
Mhm.
Because this is where people will just go through these cycles of trauma bonding with people, of dealing with narcissistic behavior, dealing with pathological liars, and they're comfortable. It makes them comfortable because that's what they're used to. The first step is just recognizing who these people are, right? It's hard sometimes because everybody gets fooled. Like,
Right.
it doesn't matter how good you are at body language. I'm pretty good. I'm not a master. I'd say I'm close to being a master at this point. I have gurus like Janine Driver. She's amazing. She has a lot of good TED Talks and things like that, if
Yeah,
people
I've
want to
heard of
check
it.
that out. Joe Navarro, he's like a 20-year FBI agent, so he knows how to interrogate people and find out if they're lying or not. He's like a human lie detector. Scott Roos, Greg Hartley, Mark Bowden, and Chase Hughes have something called the Behavior Panel on YouTube. And what they do is they analyze the body language of like serial killers. So they'll do like, things on Charles Manson, and they watch his interview and they're like picking it apart and showing you exactly what the deceptive behavior is, because these people are actually really good at deceiving people. They've gotten away with murder multiple times, and they when they're interviewed, they'll not only analyze the perpetrator, but they'll analyze the person asking the question. So that's another thing in body language, is that you not only want to look at the person who's lying or possibly being deceptive, but you also want to be able to ask the right questions and navigate through the interview. And every interaction, even this between me and you, is like an interview between us, and we're doing our own little body language things that we do in our baseline. So identifying, there's like a couple golden rules in body language. The first being identifying the baseline of people. There's a common misconception, like if I'm folding my arms like this, that I'm trying to be closed off and deceptive. That's something commonly done. And it's so commonly used for people that are cold or just resting their arms, or they're just uncomfortable, and that's their baseline. So if you see someone crossing their arms, it's almost like, doesn't really mean anything at this point. But if I'm crossing my arms all the time, you can tell, okay, he's crossing his arms all the time. And then if I uncross my arms, then you're like, okay, that's different. He's acting differently. So my baseline might be crossing my arms all the time, a very slow blink rate, and I'm not very expressive, but that's not really me. I'm actually pretty expressive. My face is all over the place half the time. But anyway, yeah, finding a baseline is very important in body language, because it will help you basically identify that person's steady state.
Yeah.
And
Where they
then the next thing you want to watch for is like the contradictions and the clusters of body language. Do you know what the most honest part of the body is?
the face.
That's what a lot of people think, actually, the face, because it's something that's, has the most expression, but it's actually the feet.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So the feet, if you're watching the feet, because people don't think about their feet and what their feet are doing, so their feet just subconsciously do what they want to do half the time. If I'm talking to you and my feet are facing right at you and I'm engaged and I'm having a conversation, that means that I'm into the conversation and I want to be here. But if my feet start doing this and I'm moved, like you'll see, like I'm facing you, but my feet start moving a little bit to the left or right, the feet point to where you want to go.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So if you're in a conversation, you walk up to people and you're talking to them and you see one of their foot, it's like makes an L, like one of their feet kind of like faces the door as
Yeah.
they're talking to you, you should sort of kind of bow out of the conversation if it's just
Oh,
you and them.
interesting.
You do what you want to do, obviously, but you can tell that this person is not really engaged. They kind of want to leave the situation, or they're uncomfortable, or whatever it is. Your body parts get more dishonest as you go up, I should say. So like the face actually is the most deceptive part of the body, because we're taught from an early age, when parents would say, like, if grandma's having a birthday and then the kid doesn't like grandma because she smells funny or whatever, so the kid like doesn't want to talk to the grandma, and they're like, put on a smiling face, like make sure you smile for grandma. And so we've learned from an early age to kind of lie through our face to make people comfortable or just alleviate any kind of confrontation or whatever. So yeah, so that's kind of another thing you watch for, is you watch for contradictions and clusters. So my face might be smiling and we're talking, but my feet might be like, I'm wanting to go this way, so
Yeah.
so it's watching for things like that. And another thing, a big one, is like looking for the comfort versus discomfort. So everybody, like I said, has their baseline, and you want to understand that when people are comfortable, they're going to be one way, and when they're uncomfortable, they're going to act a different way. Like whether it's blink rate, or their feet moving a certain direction, or they're tapping with their leg or tapping with their hand, you can sense when they're uncomfortable. And so that's, another thing to watch for. And that's also something like you want to watch for people that are being open. There's open body language where you feel like they're open with you, like palms facing you, their chest is up and out, or if they're being closed off and they're kind of sinking down, like turtlenecking and crossing their arms. And you can kind of tell open versus closed. So that's kind of like, how do you look for comfort versus discomfort? Golden rule is just be subtle with your observations. Some people will just kind of like, they're staring at, you use your peripheral vision a little bit. You don't want to be invasive with how you interact with people.
Yeah.
Because once people learn some of these things, they start being like, oh, this person's lying right away. Oh, they look down to the left, so that means they're making this shit up or whatever. It doesn't necessarily mean that.
Yeah.
And you got to be subtle, because otherwise, when people know they're being observed, they're
Hmm.
going to change their behavior.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So, and this all comes with trying to weed out the people in your life that are being deceptive. And sometimes it'll surprise you. Sometimes the people you thought were deceptive are actually being honest. And sometimes the people you thought were being honest are the actual most deceptive ones.
Hmm.
So it's hard to tell. And like I said, we can all be fooled. And another golden rule, like the last one that I tell people, it's just, you got to practice this stuff. You can know it. Like people listening now, they might, oh, now I know this means that, and so I know it, and so now from now on I'll be good at it. And it's like, no. You have to practice this stuff every day and recognizing it. And every person is a little different, and they're going to do things a little different. So when you practice, and you just notice these things, it becomes a lot easier and almost reactive, to where you're just like intuitively, a person's intentions before they even actually talk to you about what their intentions are, which is, it's not a superpower or anything, but it's definitely an advantage in
Oh yeah,
situations.
definitely. 100%. Oh my gosh, I'm definitely gonna start doing this now of like watching, not watching people, like you said, but kind of observing, and just seeing, am I right? Am I wrong? Like, what's the vibe here?
Yeah, totally. And it's fun. It's kind of it's kind of like Pandora's box, right? So
Yeah,
once you learn this stuff, you can't unsee it. And I actually warn people when we go into the training, I'm like, are you sure you want to do this? Because it's something that it might get a little lonely at the beginning because you're going to start seeing people that you thought were your friends that you suddenly realize they're manipulative and they're taking advantage of you and they're trying to use you as a tool to fulfill their selfish needs. And then you start realizing that and you go, okay, well, I don't want to hang out with that person anymore. And you go on to this next person. You're like, oh, wait, this person's doing the same thing. And then you realize most of my friends are doing this. And it's
yeah,
like, why am I, oh, that's my trauma. I'm having trauma bonds with all these people because I grew up like this. And it's like, and all this stuff starts clicking.
yeah,
The light bulb goes off and they're like, oh, okay, well, I need to start finding new people in my life, which
yeah.
is kind of my purpose in helping people do that. So
Yeah, you gotta surround yourself with good people. I don't know. I've kind of gotten to a place in my life where like I just kind of like assume you're like innocent until proven guilty. I think you're great until you give me a reason to not think you're great. Now I kind of go into relationships very like skeptical and stuff of just like, are you who you say you are? Do you really like is this authentic and real,
yeah,
and then let them show me, yes, it is, or no, it's not. After I got out of my abusive relationship, I cut pretty much everybody off, except for like my mom, my dad, like family members, pretty much. And then I've like slowly integrated more people in my life. And like, I've even been deceived. There was this girl I was friends with for like over a year. And it turned out that she just was disrespectful and like didn't care about me at all, like come to find out. Yeah, I mean everybody gets deceived, but I definitely think I've gotten like I have a very small circle, but it's a very good circle that I really feel like these people are genuine.
yeah,
So it's just you got to be very assessive or like assess things, you know.
yeah. Being able to, and I call it finding your tribe. So like
Yeah,
finding the
100%.
people that you resonate with, and you're like, okay, we're either trying to accomplish the same goals together, or you don't want to say you're using this person to accomplish your goals, but the person brings you joy, and they're not out for selfish means. They actually are being of service to you, and you're being of service to them. And that brings me to it reminds me of this book that I read, and it talks about like the different ways that people steal energy from one another.
Hmm.
So there's like four different ways, right? So you got two passive ways and you got two aggressive ways.
Yeah.
And of each passive and aggressive, there's like a more passive and a more aggressive way. So the
Yeah.
most aggressive way that people steal energy from one another is they use intimidation. Like, if you don't believe what I believe or go my direction, I'm gonna beat you up, like
Yeah.
physically beat you up, or like do something to harm you. So that's the most aggressive way. And that, obviously will steal energy from people and steal, if you want to call it energy, you just want to call it like just your happiness, like the way you feel on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
So, and then, of the two aggressive ways, there's the intimidation, the intimidator, and then there's the interrogator, which is a little less aggressive, but it's still pretty aggressive, because these are the
Yeah.
people that you're in a group of people and they start making fun of someone to make themselves feel better, or they point out, oh, look at what she's wearing, ha ha ha, and everybody laughs, and it gives them a boost of energy because
Yeah.
basically stealing energy or happiness from the situation.
Yeah.
And then there's the two passive ways. And the most passive way that people steal energy from one another is they become like the poor me, right? This is Eeyore
Oh, yeah.
from Winnie the Pooh. This is Eeyore, the donkey that's always like, oh, Pooh, oh, woe is me. My life's horrible. I have gone through this. And so they're always the victim, and you always feel bad for them. And you always want to like placate to them and be like, what can I do for you today? Right when they walk in the room, you're like, oh, I feel so bad for this person already. They don't even have to say anything because their body language is screaming at you, like, please help me. I'm miserable, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And it's just like, and we've all done it in different situations. And I can say I've done it to manipulate when I was younger. I was the poor me, and then on top of that, instead of just being the poor me, there's another passive way to steal energy from one another, and that's the aloof person. So the aloof person will be in a situation that they are uncomfortable with, and they just kind of like walk away, and they gloat, and they're kicking rocks in the corner, and everyone's like, oh, we have to go chase this person down and make sure they're all right and see how they, and when that person gets chased down, they get a boost of energy, like, oh, they finally came and realized that I'm miserable over here in the corner, you know. And then they kind of become the poor me, or they'll become the interrogator. And all this is based off of like how your parents raised you, you know. Like one of them might have been an intimidator, like my father was. He was like, you know, hard to even talk to, because if you felt like you said something wrong to him, he just reached for his belt. And so then my mom was another, you know, she was probably more of the aloof, like just kind of walk away from the situation. But that created who I am and the way I react to things. But once we recognize this and we say, okay, this is what's happening in our lives, you can start coming out of it and saying like, okay, well, I don't want to steal energy from people. I don't want to do this. And I want to have a constructive conversation with somebody. And you have these conversations and you feel this great boost of energy when you're both organically creating energy together and not stealing it from one another. Like you both come together and you combine your conversation and your actions, and next thing you know, like you both feel boosted and you feel great because you're helping each other, because you're relating to one another, you're resonating in the conversation, you're being engaging. There's no sort of deceptive, manipulative means behind it, you know. So so that's something that I try to tell people, is like recognize your own control drama, it's called. And I have to give James Redfield credit for that. He wrote the Celestine Prophecy, and that was one of my go-to books, like when I was in my early 20s, that I really, really enjoyed, and it kind of had helped me turn a corner after I had my kid. So,
Oh wow, that's so neat. So do you assess yourself? Like, is there a way for you to like assess yourself and see like what your baseline is, or like what kind of, like you were saying, your control things are, and like how does that help you kind of in your relationships? Because like we can assess others, but I think we should also be like assessing ourselves so that we go into situations being the best version of ourselves, you know?
yeah, totally. That's easier said than done. That's one of the harder things that you got to do. It's like turning the camera back on yourself, kind of thing. People are uncomfortable with that. They don't want to be introspective. They want to sort of judge other people usually. That's our first inclination, is to not look inward, is to look outward. And so in order to do that, again, I was saying that you have to identify what your trauma is, what the things are that you do, that you repeat, the cycles you have, the mistakes you make, the kind of people you gravitate towards, and if they're toxic or not, you know. So it's a long road of assessing these kind of things. And in finding your own baseline in body language is a difficult thing to do. But basically, once you realize the things that mean certain things, because body language is basically your subconscious talking before your conscious mind gets a hold of it and actually turns it into speech. So Janine Driver has this really good analogy of a tree. And so communication is this tree. So the roots of the tree at the very bottom, the roots are your beliefs. So we all have our own beliefs. We all have our own system of beliefs, and that can obviously change, but they're usually pretty steadfast, you know, in what we believe is what we believe. And then it moves up. The next form of communication is going to be body language. Like right after your beliefs, your body language, your subconscious mind takes over, boom, your body language happens. And then the branches are your thoughts, right? So, and usually what happens, it's kind of crazy, is that the body language happens up to 5 seconds before the thoughts happen.
Oh,
Right? So
interesting.
you might be going about your business, and your body's doing stuff, and then 5 seconds later you realize what you're doing, and then you're like, oh, this is what I'm feeling and thinking right now, and this is what my body's kind of doing. Some people don't even recognize that their body's doing that. They just think it and they go, okay, boom. And then their words come out, and the words are the leaves on the tree, right? And then the leaves can actually, with words, you can create seeds that plant in other people's belief systems, and so you can either use those words to manipulate and change people's beliefs, or you can use those words to help people's beliefs and spawn a good relationship.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting with comparing the trunk of the tree to the branches, right? Because that can happen about 5 seconds before you actually have that thought. So do you think if you're in a situation where someone might be abusive, that if you know what they're going to think 5 seconds before they do, that you have an advantage?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, you definitely do. And like I said, it's not a superpower, but it's definitely an advantage. So once
Oh, yes.
you start
I feel like
seeing
in
these.
those situations, like even it's like kind of a safety thing for me. Like I just feel like if I had these tools that I have now, especially like body language and stuff, I could have assessed the situation and maybe not gotten as far down the road as I did, like
Yeah.
abuse is like a frog in boiling water, if you put a frog in boiling water, immediately it jumps right out. But if you put a frog in regular water, and then slowly turn the heat up, it'll fry itself to death.
Yep.
And so it's like I think with narcissists and abuser or anyone really that's toxic, they will show you early on who they are, but it's very subtle because they're good at like masking who they really are, and they want to put on this facade of I'm a great person, and
Yeah.
they're really not a great person, and so I think like tools like this of body language analysis and whatnot really can help people like in the early stages of us meeting someone and assessing like who they are so that they don't get into scary situations like that.
Yeah, that's so true. That's I never really thought of it that way, but yeah, no, a narcissist will kind of like put their narcissistic dial up to 1 at the beginning and just
Yeah,
test the waters a little bit and see if they can get away with stuff, and then 2 and then 3, and the next thing you know, they're screaming at you and throwing their phones at you and
yeah,
and trying to jump out of a moving vehicle or whatever it is that these people do that try to manipulate the situation.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, that's a really good point. And the fact that a lot of people don't see that narcissistic dial from like the first 1 to about 6, it can go all the way up to a 6 or 7, and people are still oblivious because they're so trauma bonded with this person that they don't even recognize it. But that's like what I said, is like when you start recognizing the body language, you start seeing it very early on.
Yep.
It can almost be harmful to a person to learn it too quickly and not really understand the intricacies of it, because you can start thinking that this person's thinking this or saying this when you don't really have like their baseline down yet, or you don't know how to do baselining. And there's a couple ways you can do a baselining thing, and I can do it with you right now.
Hmm.
So if I'm gonna try to get your baseline and we're talking, like the first thing I'm gonna do is just ask you easy questions, like, so what's your full name?
Yeah.
I'm
Lexi.
asking you.
Yeah.
Where'd you go to school?
Penrose Academy.
Uh, so do you have friends that you hang out with on the weekends? Do you like to do things like, what do you do for fun?
Hang out with Zara.
Right. So how much do you think you lie on a daily basis?
I don't know. I'm in the customer service industry, so I feel like that requires a little bit of lying. Are you having a
Really?
good day? Yeah, totally. Even though I got like 4 hours of sleep and I'm exhausted, like I feel like there's always like little white lies in
Sure.
certain situations.
Yep. So, but did you see that right there? So what I just did is I asked you a couple easy questions, and that last question, you started getting a little more animated with your answer. So now I can kind of tell where your baseline is compared to where your discomfort might be, because that question might have made you a little uncomfortable,
Yeah, because I don't like lying.
Yeah, right. So, so I mean that's a very basic way to baseline people, is you can just ask them a couple easy questions, and then you get into like a grilling question where you kind of
Yeah,
ask them something hardcore where they're like, oh, like and then they start getting uncomfortable. It doesn't necessarily mean they're lying. It means
yeah,
they're uncomfortable. So detecting lies is the hardest thing to do. Like some people, you watch these YouTube videos and it cracks me up because they're like, find out if someone's lying in the first 1 minute, and it's like, you can't you know, you
That's
can't,
amazing.
that's one of the worst things people do in this space is they're like, we're going to teach you how to detect deception, 100% clip, boom, and you'll never be lied to again, and this and that. And it's like, that's impossible.
Yeah.
Even people like Joe Navarro, he's been doing this for 20 years for the FBI. He gets fooled, you know, people get fooled, and it's going to happen to you. You know, you just got to accept the fact that people are going to be able to pull one over on you, but you still have to be hyper vigilant and understand the signs. That way you can start asking the right questions. So a big thing when you're talking to somebody is noticing that discomfort. So once they start kind of deviating from their baseline, ducking and dodging the question a little bit, instead of just moving on to the next question, you can say, oh, can you maybe clarify that a little more for me? Or, you know, I didn't really understand this point very much. Can you maybe make that a little more clear? Or, you know, things like that, that sort of, you get into that question a little more, you understand what's making them uncomfortable, and you kind of have them decipher that a little better for you, you know. And then they'll kind of do things like, if you ask somebody a question and it makes them uncomfortable, and then you ask another question, you get into it, they can give you the politician answer, I call it. It's like the non-answer. So you ask a question and then they start talking, and they over explain everything, and they start answering a different question, you know.
Yeah.
And then they answer the question, then you feel like, oh, they answered a question, I can move on, when they actually just totally dodged your question. And
Yeah.
so you got to recognize that kind of thing too, where they give you a non-answer in a situation. And a lot of people won't recognize it. They'll just be like, oh, they answered the question. So some of these reporters, obviously, that ask these politicians questions, that'll happen. And politicians are shifty. Like they're good at it. That's what they do for a living. So
Yeah.
I like to watch political debates. I like to watch interviews where, you know, it's like a press conference, and you know, and unfortunately these days, a lot of the press, they're all stooges that are set up to ask exact questions, and you know, I don't want to get into like the political realm at all, but it's just, you know, you can tell when an interviewer is being easy. He's not grilling anyone. He's like lobbing these questions up for,
Yeah.
like, here you go, ahead, hit this one out of the park, you know. And then
Yeah.
instead of actually getting into them, it's rare these days that you'll see like a hard hitting interview. Like they used to
Yeah.
do it all the time, but it doesn't really seem to happen much anymore, unfortunately. But that's what I'm doing this for, is so we can ask the hard hitting questions and do
Yeah.
things that, you know, get people out of their box, and sort of, like I said, open Pandora's box a little bit. And next thing you know, you're seeing all these things, and it makes you want to learn more. And I'm personally just trying to devour as much of this information as possible. Like I have a bunch of gurus, like I said, there's Janine Driver, there's Scott Roos, there's Greg Hartley, there's Mark Bowden, there's Chase Hughes, there's Joe Navarro, he's a big one. So I mean, all these people that are really good at this, you know.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people that claim they're good at this, and they'll put quick little blurb videos out on YouTube, and it's all just BS, you know. It's like, find out if they're lying, or this means that and that means this, and it's like you don't really take into consideration everyone's own individual baseline and own individual characteristics. You're just generalizing about what this means, and
Yeah.
that can get you into trouble, you know. Like if you assume that, and you go into a situation thinking that, oh, this person's crossing their arms, so they're lying to me, next thing you know, you're accusing this innocent person of lying, you know. And that can hurt a relationship. You might be missing out on a really good relationship, because you're assuming that you know things that you know, someone taught you in the body language realm that is true when it's not. So I've had some encounters with some people that on Instagram that thought they were teaching the right thing, and I just kind of like sent them a message like, hey, you shouldn't be teaching that. That's not a good thing,
Ew.
you know. So yeah, it's still fun though. I mean, I still like interacting with people, and I do a lot of things on Instagram. Blast for Truth, by the way.
Yeah.
Blast the number 4 truth, if anybody wants to follow me out there. And right now I'm conducting research. So I'm in the process of developing a course for people, figuring out exactly how I want that course to look. So I'm conducting research if anybody's interested in just answering a few questions. I promise I won't grill you with body language. It's just a couple questions to kind of figure out what this course should entail. So I'm
Oh,
in the
very
research
cool.
phase of that. Yeah,
Yeah,
thanks.
let me know when the course is done. I'd love to take it.
Yeah, totally. No, it's gonna be fun. And yeah, if anybody wants like one-on-one teaching, I don't have any availability right now, but I should in the upcoming months. Like right now, I got a lot going on with this, but and I have some clients that I'm working with, and yeah, it's getting kind of serious with them, and it's fun to watch the process of them growing and them sort of realizing what's happening. Like I can't say any names, but I was helping this guy, and this can come in any shape and form of person. In this case, he's about a 60-year-old guy, and he's got a manipulative daughter that's sort of bleeding him for money,
Oh,
manipulating him and saying things like, I'm going to kill myself. And if you don't, like really being manipulative.
yeah, that's terrible.
And of course he's like, I can't not take this seriously.
Yeah,
I have to take it seriously because what if she does it? And I'm telling him
yeah,
like, well, what does her baseline look like? When like make sure you baseline her and you figure out when she's uncomfortable, and you got to figure out if she's telling the truth about this or not.
yeah.
So I gave him some tools, and he's still working through that. And we've come to the realization, he's come to the realization that she's being manipulative. And so he's kind of changing his course of action, and he's still being sensitive with her and trying to help her, but he's learning how to be more vulnerable with her instead of just being a man and being the dad and being protective and I'll give you whatever you need. And it's like, you
Yeah,
gotta see that this person, even if it's your own daughter or your own father or cousin or husband, wife, whatever, they can be toxic and they can be doing things to you to steal your energy and steal your resources or whatever it is that they want to get from you. So they're everywhere. It doesn't matter who they are. And
yeah.
sometimes all it takes is pointing it out. Like, why are you trying to be manipulative? You just ask the question. They go, what? And they don't even realize they're doing it because they're stuck in their own trauma, and they don't realize that behavior is being toxic to you because they're just doing what they feel is right for them because they're kind of looking inward and what they want for themselves instead of how it's affecting other people.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Self-awareness and the lack of it. Huh. I don't know, it's fascinating to me, like just watching and observing people and like why they do what they do, or if they're even aware of what they're doing. Because like you were saying, like most people aren't even aware of what they're doing. Like if somebody's rude to you or in the grocery store, or like, like cuts in front of you if you're waiting in line somewhere or something, like they're not even conscious of it. I don't think, most of the time they don't know that they're being an asshole. And sometimes you just got to be like, hey dude, you're being an asshole. Like you
Yeah.
stop. Like,
Yeah. Well, Janine Driver has this saying, and I don't know where she got it, but it's great. But she says that bees are not flying around telling flies that honey tastes better than shit.
yeah,
You know, so you got to find the people that they're not going to be flying around telling, they're not going to be like in your face. You got to find these people that are good people, and you want a tribe of bees, not a tribe of flies.
exactly.
So getting the flies out of your beehive, I guess, or
Yeah,
getting them out of your honey or whatever it is that
yeah,
you have to say is not the easiest thing because some of these flies look like bees, and maybe that's a yellow jacket, maybe that, who knows, like if I'm making the analogy, it's just
yeah.
it's not easy for people, and that's what I've kind of made my life purpose, is helping people find the bees instead of dealing with flies every day. And as I
That's
said, I still bartend weekends, and I see flies all the time.
Yep.
Bar flies, as a matter of
Fireflies.
fact.
Yep.
Yeah, they're everywhere. And I see a lot of pain in these people, and I see a lot of trauma. And you got to pick the right moment to point out what people's behavior is stemming from. Like you might say, if someone's being a poor me and trying to like get energy from you by saying, oh, woe is me, I'm the victim, and it's hard for some people to be like, stop playing the victim. You need to step up. You need to take control of your life. You need to take responsibility, and it's not their fault, it's your own fault. It's hard for some people to do that, but sometimes you just got to shake them a little bit and say, hey, stop trying to make me feel sorry for you all the time. Or if there's an intimidator, like, are you trying to scare me right now?
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm not scared of you. Stop trying to intimidate me. And usually just when
Yeah.
you call it out, they're like, I'm not doing that. What are you talking about? And they deny it, but then they'll probably reflect later and realize their behavior. And sometimes I've had people come back to me and be like, hey, I'm sorry for for acting that way. I didn't mean to. How can we help? And so there are people that really want to change their behavior, and those are the people that I want to work with. Those are the bees that are realizing that they have things that they need to change. And even myself, I have things in my behavior, and I'm not perfect, and I want to be able to change my behavior in a way that I become a bee myself, and I think I am now at this point. But
Yeah.
so it's a constant process. It's never, that's the fun of it. It's never ending. It's a constant process. There's always questions left unanswered, and that's what makes it fun, right? It's life.
Yeah, 100%. I don't know. I think I'm very self-aware, and like one of the things I know I do is if I get nervous, I will bite my nails. I've been biting my nails since I was a kid, or I'll like pick at my hands, and like I'm constantly working like to stop doing that. Like I
Yeah.
notice it all the time. It drives people nuts, and sometimes it drives me nuts even, but I don't know. Like you said, it's a constant battle, a constant struggle of like not being fidgety or not, biting your
Yeah.
nails, whatever it is.
Mhm.
So,
And that's, turning the camera on yourself, which is hard to do sometimes. So even my own kid, like she had a problem with, she would pick at her cuticles, and she'd be,
mhm.
up to the point where it was almost bleeding on a day-to-day basis. And then you got to figure it's not just like, oh, I'm doing that, I got to stop. It's like you got to realize the root of that issue, like why you're doing that. And that's a confidence thing. Like dealing with the nails is like you're having low confidence in yourself, and you're having low self-esteem in yourself because of your behavior. And so like when you realize why you're doing the things you're doing, not just I'm doing it, I should stop. It's like, why am I doing this behavior right now? Is it because of my self-esteem issue, because of this trauma that I've had? And once you start working through that trauma instead of like just the behavior, you got to
Mhm.
get to the root. And that's, another thing I tell people, it's not easy to do. And sometimes when you point it out to people, they get defensive and upset, and so you, in this realm, you got to be able to not pull any punches. You have to be able to tell people how it is. And that's why the whole blast for truth thing is a thing. And blast actually stands for body language awareness skills training. So
Oh,
it's an
wow.
acronym. And so it's not just the body language awareness, it's the skill training and developing the tools and the skills to recognize these things, and not just in other people, but yourself.
Yeah,
And being
100%.
able to figure out why you do the things you do. And that's half of it.
Mhm.
Like half of the course is basically going inward and realizing what you're doing with your own nonverbal communication. And that way you can sort of get to the root of your issues and what your subconscious is actually portraying to the world. And so you go inward and you heal that. And then at that point, once you feel pretty confident about your own root issues and trauma, you can go out and help other people, and you can also help yourself by alleviating those toxic relationships and creating that tribe of people. And like you said, you have a small circle, and that's really all you need. You don't need a big circle. Some
Yeah,
people like to have a huge circle of people, and I'm not saying that's bad,
yeah,
but having a small circle is usually the way to go. Like, what does the saying go? It's I'd rather have 4 quarters than 100 pennies.
exactly. Yeah.
So, but I don't know. There's a lot of stuff I could talk about when it comes to body language, and I could keep going on and on and give people tips and tricks and things like that. And it's a lot of fun to do, and I do it quite a bit. But is there anything you want to know? Like, is there any sort of like, I want to know this about the body, or this about nonverbal communication, or whatnot? Is there anything you can think of? I'm a little hopped up on coffee right now, if you haven't
No,
noticed.
you're good. You're good. I love it. I love it. This is so fascinating to me. It's really cool. I guess like what's one tool you can give us for like just like a day-to-day, like one easy tool to like get people started down this cool, fascinating journey?
Sure. Okay. Let's see. So Chase Hughes in the 6 minute X-ray, he kind of says in the first 6 minutes of meeting someone, you should be able to understand like their baseline, their body language. And I already told you about the baselining and kind of how to go about that.
Yeah.
But really, thinking about the four laws that he talks about. And one of them is that you have to understand that everybody is suffering and everybody is insecure, right? So when you look at someone and you think, sometimes you'll think, oh, this person's just being stupid. And it's like, no, this person's suffering and insecure. So once you sort of shift that perspective into that sort of mindset, it helps you sort of realize that they're suffering, they're insecure, and there's a reason for their behavior. And so I shouldn't just jump to conclusions about them. Like there's a root issue that they're dealing with, and that you should be more sympathetic to that. And everyone's wearing a mask. That's another law, is you have to understand that everybody's wearing a mask, right? Whether they would want to admit it or not. And usually the people that say they're not wearing a mask have the thickest mask there is. so if someone's admitting, yeah, sometimes I act this way and it's not really me, it's like, okay, that person's probably being honest. But if they're like, I'm always honest, I never lie, I'm always who I am, and it's brutal honest all the time, and it's like, that's the person you got to watch out for, because and when I asked you, you said, oh yeah, sometimes we tell white lies, and like the average person hears like 140 lies a day or something ridiculous. Yeah. So, and in body language, if you can cut that back, and like I said, people say if you learn body language, some of them will say like you can cut out 100% of the lies, and it's like, no. But you can cut that down to say 10 to 20% less, and that's 20 to 40 lies less per day, possibly, So what do you think that's going to do with your life? Do you think that if you realize that people are lying to you, even just a little bit more, is it going to change your life? Most likely, yes. And another thing you got to watch out is everyone's pretending to not wear a mask at times. Like that mask is there, but everyone will pretend that they're not from time to time. I do it, you do it, we all do it. And realizing that is a good thing to watch out for. And again, everyone's a product of childhood suffering and reward. So like they'll get rewarded, and so they act a certain way when they're kids, and then it kind of grows into what you do as an adult when you get rewarded with things. Or you're suffering as a child is the same thing. Like if you suffer as a kid, you're gonna grow into this person, like I said, with the control dramas, where you're stealing energy in a passive or aggressive way, depending on how your parents raised you. And there's ways. So that being said, that's one thing I could say, is there's 4 laws about the mask, and realizing that people are suffering and all that. And then there's different lenses that people look through. And you can look at people in 4 different ways, right? So you look at someone, and one of the, and I'm guilty of this back in my younger days, I would look at people as just broken. So, that's the lens. You just look and you say, oh, people are just broken. And there's, that's just how they are. And I'm going to treat them as broken. And that basically is just calling people stupid and idiots, and just leaving it at that surface level, and just being like, oh, if someone cuts you off on the freeway, you're going to get in front of them and cut them off and flip them off through the window. And, that's that kind of person. That's how they react with that lens. And then the next lens is just that people are different. Maybe they're not broken, they're just different from me, and they think differently. And if people act in a certain way, they'll take it personally, but they don't act back. They're just going to be like, that person's just different. That's just how it is. But then there's another lens, and it's like people are facts. Like people are facts. They just are who they are. It's unchangeable. It's permanent. That's just who they are. People are just that fact. And usually this person is probably a little happier than those first 2. They're going to be like, okay, well, if that's just the fact, that's how it is, I'm just going to accept it. That's just how it is. But the highest level, and this is like what behavior profilers do, is that people are reasons. Like people act this way for a reason. It's not just because they're stupid or broken or different or facts. They are like this because of something that happened to them when they were a kid, or a recent relationship, or they're suffering, like I said, in the law that you have to understand. So once you look at people in this way, and like say someone cuts you off on the freeway, like I was saying, you can stop, kind of assess the situation, understand that that person's probably, having a rough life, or not instantly assume that they're stupid. You can slow down on the freeway and you can get out of their way. And it's the analogy in real life. Like if you see someone coming through like a wrecking ball, you can kind of just be like, okay, I need to avoid that person, and kind of not, that's something that I'm not going to confront this person. Or there might be a time to confront them and say, hey, why are you being a wrecking ball right now? And they might not even realize they're doing it, or they might try to punch you in the face. So you got to be careful of that too.
Yeah.
That's, the aggressive body language is something that's easy for me to see, as being a male in the bartending industry for so long. You see when things escalate, and when people are going to fight or things are going to happen. Like I actually saw, and this is an easy one. Like there was a guy and he's talking to this other guy, and I'm across the bar and I'm watching it, and I can kind of see they're getting a little like chesty with each other,
Yeah.
doing this kind of thing. And one of them reaches for the bottle he's holding like this.
Oh no.
Right. And so
Yeah.
that's when I knew. I was like, okay. And I go over there and I'm like, hey, and I grab his arm and I'm like, you need to settle down. You need to leave and you need to settle down.
Yeah.
Because the one guy was just, the guy that reached for the bottle was just kind of sitting there. And next thing you know, he reaches for the bottle. But the other guy was kind of up in his face, getting
Yeah.
close,
He was the
kind of being
aggressor, and the guy
annoyed,
was like,
drunk,
"Nope."
and just right in his ear. And the guy's like, oh, yeah. And I said, oh, no, you know.
Yeah.
And that's an easy one, right? That's something that's like, but there's little subtle things too. Like you'll see with guys that are going to fight at the bar, even women get aggressive with each other.
Hmm.
They'll be standing there with their hands at their sides, and next thing you know, their chest starts coming out like this.
Yeah.
And then their hands down at their sides, they got their hands in a fist, like their
Yeah.
hands are in a fist and they're clenching, and you can just see the stress.
Hmm.
So things like that you get to see pretty easily. But I mean, it's a good sociological experiment going to the bar on the weekends, I'll tell you that much.
Oh yeah. I've recently gotten to DJing and stuff, and so I've been spending more time in bars, and yeah, you definitely get to see the very like interesting side of people, especially when they're drinking, because the limitations, or like the mask kind of falls, the drunker
Yeah,
they get. And so it's interesting. Bars are a great place to people watch and just like observe, and
yeah,
like see what people are gonna do, now that
yeah,
they've got a little alcohol in their system.
yeah. In vino veritas, the truth comes out. It's entertaining. Even
Yeah,
just
for
people
sure.
watching, you can just people watch and watch conversations from a distance, not hear what they're saying, and kind of understand the conversation, where it's going.
Yeah.
Especially if they're expressive, but even if they're not, you can see how they're standing, where their feet are facing, if they start to sort of open or close off a little bit. It's a good practice. And there's this one thing that you can do that is a pretty simple practice. Reality TV, I hate reality TV. Like I am not a fan. I do
One of my
not
guilty
like.
pleasures.
I
I'm
really,
not gonna lie, I kind of love
you're not
it.
alone. You're not alone. There's a lot of people. It's not personally, I can't stand it.
Yeah.
But it's a good training device for me. So I'll watch things like, The Bachelorette or The Bachelor or Jersey Shore or whatever, but I'll
Yeah.
turn the volume off, and, saves my ears from the nonsense for one thing.
Yeah.
But it also, you can watch, and the editing's pretty good in these shows, to where they'll zip the camera to someone's face after someone says something, and you'll see their face react,
Yeah.
and if you turn the volume off and you just watch it, and you're kind of trying to guess, and you can do this with a friend, right? You have a friend with you and you're both watching, and you go, okay, this is what I think the conversation's about, this is what I think's going on, and you kind of compare notes and you go, okay, this is what I think, da, 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 da. And then you go and you rewatch it with the sound on, and you see how close you were to
Oh,
being correct
interesting.
about the things. And that's a
I'm
good
gonna do
training.
that
That's
next
one of
time I
the
watch reality TV.
Yeah, that's one of the training things that I tell people to
Oh, that's
do a couple
cool.
times. And so yeah.
If you can just give people your social media, where they can find you,
Sure.
where they can find the training course, when it's available, or if they want to be a part of, you building the training course, where they can get involved with that. And yeah, just let people know where to find you.
Sure. Yeah. So right now I have an Instagram. It's Blast for Truth. So blast the number four and truth. And you can DM me on Instagram if you want to be part of the research, or if you want to, try to schedule an appointment where we could talk one-on-one. And then also you can email me at blastfortruth@gmail.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. This is a
Of
great
course.
episode. I'm really excited about it. I think that it'll bring a lot of people some really great insight and stuff. Yeah, I'll link all your social medias and everything down in the description so that people could find you. And yeah, do you have anything else to add before we wrap this up?
I mean, just what I was talking about with the just try to understand that people are reasons, and that there's a reason for their behavior, and being patient with people, because it's easy to have someone's behavior get you into a reaction cycle
Mhm.
instead of seeing their behavior, processing it, and responding. So instead of reacting, we should respond a little more, I think, in society. And that's the one thing I would say.
I love that. That's awesome. Thank you so much for being
Yeah,
here. I really, really appreciate it.
of
Um,
course. Thank
and
you. This has been fun.
yes, thank you. Oh my goodness. All right. Thank you all for enjoying this episode of Unsank Pod, and I will see you on the next one. Bye, guys.
Bye.